Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester. For more than 150 years, ours has been a congregation of open minds and loving hearts, celebrating many sources of wisdom and many spiritual paths. Your faith, your doubts, your questions, your hopes for our world are welcome here. And our doors are closed because our hearts are open, living our values of care and compassion. You can stay connected online through Sunday services, coffee hour, and small groups. There are spirit kits with themed activities each month for children and families. And if you're a newcomer, you can check out videos on our website and find a visitor form where you can learn more about the history of our church, how to get connected during this time, and an online membership class as well. Mostly, know that you are welcome here. We're so glad that you've joined us. And this Wednesday night, you can join me for our weekly Wednesday forum, Pandemic Church, a year in review. We'll reflect together about this past year in church and beyond, look a bit more deeply into the graph you'll learn more about later in this service, and reflect on what comes next in our spiritual growth, in our church, in our lives, how we found resilience to mark both grief and love during this pandemic year. So I invite you to join me this Wednesday at 6:30 online. And today's offering will go to support the mission of this church, including half for our Human Needs Fund for emergency financial assistance. Thank you for your generosity. And finally, you may have seen the e-news this week. Have you pledged yet? Some of you have, some not yet. It's okay, there's still time. You may have seen an update this week that our goal is 100% participation, and you can pledge easily online or you can call the office. Our hopes for next year's budget include improved online accessibility for our services and more, supporting the Building Our Future consultation work, and attending to deferred staff salary adjustments that we weren't able to get to this past year. Mostly, it's continuing to tend the flame of our church that is rooted in justice and in love and spiritual growth. And join us next Sunday for a special drive-through celebration with special gift bags and more from noon to 1:30. So next Sunday, noon to 1:30, here in the lower parking lot. All are welcome. We hope to see you there. And finally, in the words of the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, minister of this church in the 1870s, may our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. It's good to be together.
This is the Unitarian Universalist Church. This is the Church of the Flaming Chalice. This is the Church of the Open Mind. This is the Church of the Loving Heart, where friends come together and share.
Feeling does commitment look like? For a long period of time, I seldom watched movies and television even less. As a result, I would not, or even could not, be able to recommend movies to other people. When I was thinking about commitment, though, a particular movie that I believe deserves special attention came into my mind, then proceeded with the usual task of trying to figure out exactly why. A father and daughter live off the grid in the forests outside of Portland, Oregon. They sleep in tents and walk the long journey into town for food and supplies. The young girl's father is a troubled veteran living with PTSD. It seems he's not able to find comfort in the way of life most of us inhabit in our daily lives, and so his troubled mind finds a level of peace in the woods and away from people, living a minimalist life. Not exactly the Thoreau thing, but you could find some similar interpretation. Whatever the challenges faced, living this way was preferable to a busy, crowded city. His daughter, whose name is Tom, seems to be in solidarity with his way of life. But it all changes the day they are discovered and their world is taken apart. Their makeshift living quarters are destroyed, and they find themselves treading water within the social services system, who try to help by doing what is best for them. And to a degree, they are successful. A local Christmas tree farmer is willing to give Will a job, along with a temporary place to live for the two of them. But as we watch Will shoving a television set into the closet, we know his mind is not satisfied and he is planning to move on again. It's hard on his daughter, Tom, who begins to like it there, as she has made some friends and would like to stay. But she is committed to her father. He calculates, he makes his move, they pack, and they leave. They get a ride north and are dropped off in the woods again. The woods farther north are colder now, and Tom is cold and questions why they must do this. But she stays with her father despite the hardships. When they find an old cabin in the woods, life is temporarily better. But then Will goes out for food and doesn't return. Tom searches for him only to find him injured. She hails down some four-wheelers who help her get him to a place where he can heal and rest. A close call. As they move through these challenges together, I got the sense of a quiet commitment between two people, father and daughter. A commitment born of love and respect they have for each other. It is that commitment that creates a bond that bridges the gap between young and old, father and daughter, and family and society. The movie portrays this in a quiet and respectful manner. And while you can see Tom's growing frustration, there are no scenes of people raising their voices and churning out difficult solutions through great conflict. And in many scenes, there is little said, and you are left visually piecing together how each one is feeling. To me, their life together at this point is a bare bones relationship based on little more than an understanding of a need to be and work together. Can it be this simple? Have you been on a long hiking trek or other outdoor experiences with another person or a small group? A Boundary Waters canoe trip, perhaps, where your commitment to yourself and others is as uncomplicated as greeting the morning sun, or light drizzling rain, as the case may be, and welcoming the tasks you share for the day. Did you go to camp when you were younger? And can you recall life experiences that stayed with you from this time of your youth? Did these simple life values commit you to the values you know now? It wasn't too long ago, in the era we like to refer to as the 60s, There was a great emphasis on the importance of the outdoor experience. In Aldo Leopold's vision, he believed that direct contact with the natural world was crucial in shaping our ability to extend our ethics beyond our own self-interest. And for me personally, carbon footprint will never be a substitute for the terms like environment, wilderness, and conservation. My hope for the future is that we'll have the sense to share a commitment to these values alongside our driving fascination with technology. The title of this movie is Leave No Trace. If you wish to explore it further, I think you'll be pleased with the ending. May we commit each day in beauty, love, and knowledge of ourselves, the earth, and each other.
Hello, friends. Today I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce you to someone. Her name is Izzy Gizmo, and boy, is she committed to making a change. Izzy Gizmo, written by Pip Jones, illustrated by Sarah Ogilvie. Izzy Gizmo, a girl who loved to invent, carried her tool bag wherever she went, in case she discovered a thing to be mended or a gadget to tweak to make it more splendid. But the trouble with things that have dials and switches is they don't always work. They have certain glitches. The T-Mendus, for instance, did such a fine job till it popped a piston and off dropped a knob. Then the Swirly Spagsonic, for eating spaghetti, turned Grandpa's wallpaper into confetti. The Beardtastic had Grandpa near perfectly styled, till the foam overflowed and the clippers went wild. Well, Isabel, who was so clever and bright, would get rather cross when things didn't go right. And she huffed, "It's too tough. I've had it. I quit." She kicked her invention and called it a twit. Isabel fumed. Grandpa smiled and chuckled. "You can't just quit 'cause that thingy bob buckled. Now trust me, young lady, sometimes you need to try again and again if you want to succeed." Perhaps Grandpa was right, but still, Isabel sighed. She picked up her tool bag and wandered outside. Kicking the stones on the path as she walked, Izzy jumped at a bump. Up ahead, something squawked. From the clouds, a poor crow had taken a tumble and landed, kapoof, in a feathery jumble. Izzy ran to the vet's, but he just shook his head. "His wing is too broken to fix," the doc said. "Perhaps take him home, and there you could try to teach him to live as a crow who can't fly." Day after day, Izzy thought she had found something fun for her crow to do on the ground, like digging for worms and racing fat slugs, hopscotch and hoopla and searching for bugs. But the heartbroken crow simply gazed at the sky as the birds sang and flew happily by. One night, with the crow in the folds of her sweater, Izzy sighed, "Oh, I wish I could make him feel better. I've tried. He won't play, he won't drink, he won't eat." She was so close to admitting defeat. Grandpa said, "Izzy, don't give up on him now. I know you can do it. Just work out how." Then Grandpa passed Izzy her gadgety things, and she knew what to do. "I'll invent some new wings." Izzy piled up her books and she started to read. Then she made a long list of the things she would need. She searched for some batteries and old electronics, dismantled a mixer and the Swirly Spagsonic. The crow watched, entranced, and he held Izzy's drill while she bent, bashed, and battered and walloped until, ta-da! Izzy fastened the wings with a strap. But they hummed and they twitched, far too heavy to flap. "Arrgh!" Izzy yelled, "I'm no good at succeeding." The crow softly cawed, his beady eyes pleading. "What now?" Izzy cried. "Try again," Grandpa said. "Okay, follow me." and off with that she sped. Izzy dove in a pond where she borrowed a pump. Then she took from an engine 2 sprockets a sump. Izzy fastened the wings. They were light, they were curvy, but the wings the wrong shape turned the crow topsy-turvy. I give up, Izzy yelled with a furious frown. The crow sadly caught as he hung upside down. Izzy unscrewed the head from a shower, found special circuits to adjust the wing's power, and finally, using her trusty old pliers, she borrowed the motors from 2 big blow dryers. Yes, Izzy said, the right shape, perfect weight. But one wing flapped madly. The crow couldn't fly straight. I've had it, yelled Izzy, heading straight for a bin, but the crow blocked her path. He just wouldn't give in. Izzy twizzled and tinkered, and using his beak, the tip-tapping crow gave the screws a good tweak. Then he loosened the cog from Grandpa's old mixer. You can fly, Izzy cried. Oh, your name should be Fixer. After 2 loop-the-loops, Fixer came into land and stood happily cawing upon Izzy's hand. You tried very hard, Grandpa said, and succeeded. You kept at it, Izzy. You did what was needed. But don't pack up your tools. Your day's not quite ended. There's a few new things here now that need to be mended. So take some advice from Izzy's grandpa and follow the determination that Izzy has. Even though you may sometimes get frustrated, really, if you just keep working at it, you can usually come up with a good solution.
Breathe deep the breath of life. Find a place to center down. Breathe deeply, sit deeply here in this house, this community of welcome, this community of love and justice, hope and grace. Know that here you are named and you are known as beloved and sacred. Feel below you the earth and its ancient turning, and above you the sky, and above that the stars shining with their ancient light, holding you here in this moment right now. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by sharing silence together. Spirit of life and source of love, God of 1,000 names and beyond all naming, within the landscape of the soul we travel through seasons, through lifetimes, sometimes within a matter of hours or minutes alone, the valleys and hills, the varied journey where love and grief and hope and sorrow, shattered and mended hearts, meet there on the same road. May we find one another there, each on our own road sometimes paths merging or crossing. May we find the paths where we can travel together, each carrying the different loads we have, lending our strength to each other as we're able, so that in the midst of every journey, be it filled with grief or with gladness, it might be held in the tender embrace of love. We hold in our hearts this day all those who suffer in mind, in body, or spirit. We hold in our hearts all those who are holding joy or love, shattered hearts, or those that have just mended. I invite you to bring those names that you're holding into this time, and silently or aloud now in this moment to speak their names. For all those names and many others, may we all be held in love and in grace. These words of meditation are from T. Hoagland. Down near the bottom of the crossed out list of things you have to do today, between green thread and broccoli, you find that you have penciled in sunlight. Resting on the page, the word is beautiful. It touches you as if you had a friend and sunlight were a present, sent from someplace distant as this morning to cheer you up and remind you that among your duties, pleasure is a thing that also needs accomplishing. May it be so. Amen.
Truth by Gwendolyn Brooks. And if sun comes, how shall we greet him? Shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him? After so lengthy a session with shade? Though we have wept for him, and though we have prayed all through the night years, what if we wake one shimmering morning to hear the fierce hammering of his firm knuckles hard on the door? Shall we not shudder? Shall we not flee into the shelter, the dear, thick shelter of the familiar, propitious haze? Sweet is it, to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness. The dark hangs heavily over our eyes. Once again, a Nonviolence Training 2017 by Tess Taylor. Because the white supremacists are coming. Because the threat. Because Charlottesville. And if you don't, who will? And you never know what baton, what chemical. We are marching. We plan chants, make signs at church. Large assembly, bodies, linoleum, soup. Cardboard and markers, and salt, fog drifting. We bear forward our fury and sorrow. Estuary, sanctuary, room for our hope lights. Hate is a toxic to all living creatures. Shalom, salam, we root our anger, are alive together, must now be shields to one another. And John said, be witness. We brace one another, plant our feet. In fog, we promise to stay together. We will not raise our hands. We are not leaving.
Sometimes it can catch you off guard, catch you by surprise. Just a slight change in elevation, a dip in the road when all had seemed clear and open and free. Suddenly the air fills in, the pathway obscured, cluttered. The outer world disappears for a few moments there in the valley, surrounded by fog. If you're on a highway, it's a quick change from clarity to fog. And sometimes a constant back and forth, especially in open areas at certain times of year, these little hills and valleys, certain times of day. If you're traveling in other ways on a path at slow paces, perhaps these changes are more gradual in and out of fog. It's good to remember we are all traveling similar roads in different ways. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow for all of us. Some with top-notch safety and speed and the best technology. Some with broken down and barely holding together structures that can barely carry us at all. There are collective times where each in our own way, each with our particular stories and struggles and access and ability, travel through uncertain and unfamiliar terrain, wondering where the path leads next. How in the world might we find our way? We might often ask ourselves. If you have a good guide, be it a real person alongside you, or the words and stories of ancestors or poets, or the wisdom that you may not even know where it came from living within you, a good guide will remind you that we have tools to travel paths, and each one will come with a mixture of similar and different challenges, obstacles, to find our way. A good guide will remind you you have the tools to travel. In fog, writes Tess Taylor, promise to stay together. We've had some foggy days, foggy months, seasons, in unique and different ways this year. Whether on social media or the news or the change in season maybe is reminding you many are holding the complexity of living with COVID-19 for a year now. At church here, of course, preaching to an empty house, every preacher's nightmare until this year. Now it's just the norm. We quickly moved from a full house sanctuary one Sunday and a full dinner and a packed forum that following Wednesday night, where we were hearing news from different parts of the world and then the country, it closing in on us with some excessively hand sanitizing moments those days here in the church. We started putting the sanitizers everywhere and wiping everything down. To an emergency meeting of leaders on Thursday. I remember that morning and the sun coming in the hearth room as we wondered what in the world was happening. The doors were shut by Sunday, a Sabbath Sunday, so we could find our bearings at least a little bit before online church, something my liturgically Luddite heart resisted strongly. Online church? Are you kidding me? That began the following week, and here we are. I'm talking to my iPhone in the sanctuary. Quite the year has unfolded, and it is such a mixture of emotions, of feelings tangled together in tied up knots, of remembering, of grieving, of hoping. All of it, all the feelings, trying to find their place in our overflowing, overwhelmed hearts. Recently, I found an image, a graph of the emotional realities that often follow disasters or collective trauma, not to mention the individual trauma that people experience within and in addition to the collective trauma of a community. I found it helpful to put into an image the complexity of what I've been feeling and what I know many of you are feeling in different ways, this tangled thicket of, I don't know how I'm feeling right now. But it starts here in this graph that we're showing you now. Here in this graph, you can kind of follow along the warnings, you see, of what is to come. Maybe you remember the videos coming from Italy, then Washington State and New York, hoping our spread out Midwestern fields would protect us by enough distance and openness to sweep COVID away. Certainly many people knew that wasn't going to happen, but many of us didn't really know anything about it at all. And then you see on the graph the impact. And first, it's a beautiful, hopeful, ascending response, resilient response of the heroic things about community. That's where the images of people applauding healthcare workers on balconies comes from, and commercials about community resolve and frontline heroes. And then, boom, a quick fall, a plummet into what it all means. The long-term uncertain impact and recovery, the lack of clarity, like falling into a valley of fog. And just like those up and down country fields and valleys of fog, so goes the next several months, each in our own varied ways. Some isolated with extreme loneliness, others trapped with extreme freneticism, either too much quiet or way too much noise to think, let alone try to work at home, for life to feel normal at all. Finding little routines to help mark the days and the weeks, finding moments of soul-weary exhaustion. But how long will it be? Well, who knows what will be? And here we are, in the blue circle on that graph at the 1-year anniversary mark. Thanks a lot, Facebook, for popping up those memories. Jeesh. And we're still going up and down these valleys for a bit, remembering, like any grief, the anniversaries of loss, the impact of life-changing moments that shattered our hearts, and remembering how we had to and still are piecing together the mosaic of our soul, hoping what we have learned about ourselves and our world helps hold it together in ways that are stronger, more beautiful than before. It's in these moments right now where many people are thinking, I don't know what I'm feeling. We've gone through a lot. There seems to be hope on the way, and yet we're not there. Maybe it's your patience is running thin. Maybe you or someone you know is lashing out in ways, forgetting that right now what we need most from each other is tenderness, kindness, compassion. There's not enough of it. We need every ounce we can get. And what comes next in this graph is perhaps what intrigues me the most right now: reconstruction, a new beginning or new beginnings, imagining what we are creating, knowing that going back to normal cannot be the goal, even if part of us longs for what was. We also know more each day about how we are yet to create the world worthy of coming back to. Tess Taylor, the poet today, writes, once again, at the Nonviolence Training, writing this about a gathering in 2017, recalling the recurring and systemic cycling stories of how oppression and racism and bigotry keep making their way, staking their claim, staying alive again and again. And how communities in the face of constant trauma keep assembling in the small details of church basements and making posters, being alive together, shielding one another, bracing one another in the fog of it all, promising to stay together. Promising to stay together through the fog, the poet writes. That's commitment. That's commitment to whatever may come. That's commitment not to the self, but to each other. In these coming days, and in the trauma, too, of the trial seeking justice for the murder of George Floyd, and the fact that there's any question, that in and of itself can be traumatizing, especially to Black and oppressed communities, with the continual generational distrust that any justice can come out of our criminal injustice system. And if we're honest, we've known that the work of dismantling white supremacy in social structures and souls takes a lot of work, personal, collective work. Traveling through that off-white fog, not always knowing where we are going, but believing in what Dr. King called the mountaintop, moving toward a better possibility through the valleys. It means naming how systems of oppression take hold in our hearts, how it shows up as individualism and perfectionism and isolationism, victim blaming and assuming the best, and giving so much leeway to those in power. It takes work, too, to be willing to enter the valley of fog and uncertainty with intention with each other, as messy as it might seem. That's commitment to the possibility of change, to the slow, hard work of transformation, staying at the table through the mess, to believe beyond the valley of fog, beyond the valley of emotional despair, that some new possibility, some reconstructed, reconstituted, recommitted world might still be brought into being, like the sun burning away the fog. We still question it all. Some of us have been taught our whole lives to be hesitant of goodness, to cross it off our daily list, as the poet wrote. Like poet Gwendolyn Brooks writes, "And if sun comes, how shall we greet it? Dread Fear after so lengthy a session with shade, sleeping in the coolness of snug unawareness. That phrase, so lengthy a session with shade, a year of pandemic, generations of oppression, and yet, though the dark hangs heavily, the question remains to each of us: how shall we greet the sun? How shall we hear the song that hails a new creation, as the old hymn says, each called to be builders, each called to task divine, as another hymn says? What tools shall we bring to our part of the reconstructing towards something that is strong and loving enough to hold us all? As lengthy as the season of shade may seem, as deep as the valley might be and as thick as the fog surrounding us, how are we promising to stay together right through it all? Through the valleys and the fog, may we be good companions to one another, offering help as we are able, offering whatever tools we have to reconstruct a world that's worth working for, traveling for, through the valleys. And may we know it is love that is our constant companion, holding us all. Amen.